Okay, cool. Hey everyone, super excited to be here. This is my first meetup after two and a half long years in person. I almost forgot how to speak to an audience in person. I was so comfortable looking at all my notes on Zoom and being ready, and I was like, oh, I actually have to prepare for this. So that was interesting, but super excited to be here. I had engineering at Apartment List. I got into computer science for the love of DOS games back in the day, and although I've never actually built any game as part of my career, that's what got me into this career, and moved into management several years ago, and then continued to grow along that path. During the course of my career, I had to make a lot of build versus buy decisions. I have been in companies that have built almost all the software that you can possibly think of, just shy of maybe HR systems and or the payroll system that apparently SFUSD just recently built. But I've also, on the flip side, I've been at companies that have built billion-dollar business off of a software that was just bought on somebody's credit card for $2,000, which was pretty amazing. So I've often been in the same position of wondering, like, should I be building, buying, or what else should I be doing? So if I look at some real world examples, there are companies that invest a lot in building software. And you'll hear about Dropbox that actually started off being on AWS, and then they built their entire data center and their storage system and moved away from that. And there was Apple that built its own Apple Maps. Now, let's reserve judgment of how well that turned out for later, but they moved away from Google Maps and then built their own. And Netflix built their own CDN, Lyft built their own marketing automation platform because they were spending so much ad dollars. And you see so many stories that almost like make you wonder, should I actually be building software? And when I look at this, I thought the same too. Like, that sounds cool. Should I be thinking about building something in-house and make our engineers super excited to be building something in-house as well? And then on the flip side, you also look at companies like big ones, Airbnb and Uber, that use Twilio, for example, to completely engage with their customers, or Braze that is using Loom, or companies that use Zendesk or Figma and Zapier. And you also wonder, like, actually, you don't have to build everything and reinvent the wheel. If solutions already exist, maybe we should be using those. And often it's conflicting when you look at the coolness factor of the companies and think that I should be building something. And then when you actually see and realize how complex that is, and you see companies actually investing in buying and using some other solutions and platform as well. So I want to actually today give you a framework that I use called Crossing the 7 Cs, sticking to my Shakespeare theme here as much as possible, and talk about some of my own real world examples of things that I have built, things that I have bought, and how well that those turned out. And then hopefully walk away with what should we be doing at each stage of our decision-making process. As we think about build versus buy decision, there is basically a ton of questions, and let's navigate through those sea of decisions. So talking about 7 Cs, the C number 1, capability. So this is exactly the question of what are you solving for? What capabilities you want to build? This is your feature set. This is your core. This is what makes you stand out a lot of times. And this is what you want to go out to the market with. This is what probably your customers will use. And you should be using this as one of the key factors in decision making. Like, do I want to build that capability, or does that capability exist out there that I want to be using? And if so, should I actually be investing in building something else so that I have like the fastest time to market and a go-to-market strategy? One of the famous, not to mention the name, a personal finance software that actually allows you to allow you to organize your budgeting and where you spend all your money, etc., actually was using a different software that connected to all the banks underneath. It did not have its own technology, and you might think that is core to that company, but to actually connect to the banks. But it wasn't, like that was not the most important thing. They just focused on building the customer experience and actually relied on somebody else to actually build all the bank connectivity. And it got sold to another famous accounting company as well. So you see capabilities and situations like this, which are very core to the company, but they still end up buying instead of building. So this is definitely one of the factors that's important. Next comes cost. When you think about cost, usually there are two dimensions that people look at. One is the resources, and one is the time, like how many people do I need and how long does it take to build. That's about it. But they look at these two dimensions and then they say, okay, building is the cheapest solution or buying is the cheapest, I'm going to go that route. Cheap does not always mean it's the best or the right solution for you. There are other costs that you don't even take into account. Example, like build time. How long does it take to actually build? Maintenance costs, like it's not just enough that you just built it. You need to be able to monitor it. You need somebody to support it. You need to build the right test cases and continue to add more feature sets. So it's maintenance cost, it's new product feature cost. Like you're not going to build it once and then never enhance it. So you'll continue to invest in it. So there is that. And then there is also cost associated with infrastructure and hosting and some of the other not so visible costs that you'll have to take into account as well. And then that does not stop just at the building phase. Even if you have to buy, you might currently be using a solution and you have to transition. Over the last 2 years, I had to change data warehouses twice. Like we moved from Redshift to Snowflake and then moved again from Snowflake to BigQuery. So when you're actually buying, you also have to think about the migration cost. And there is maintenance even if you buy a software as well. And onboarding costs, like how long does it take for me to get used to this new system and how long does it take for my engineers to learn these new systems as well. And there's offboarding cost. In our case, when we switched data warehouses twice, there was some offboarding cost as well because sometimes you can't wait till your contract end date to be on the new service. So you will have some overlap time where you're paying for two systems all at once and you want to test it out for redundancy and things like that. So there is all of that cost involved. So cost is, again, a huge factor in decision making, but thinking through not just two dimensions, but beyond that is super critical. The third one is complexity. I like to build systems that are super simple, easy to understand, and like I should be able to explain it to anybody on like the sales team, the growth team, any business stakeholder pretty easily and quickly. But a lot of the things that we build sometimes is super complex. And complexity arises from a need of sometimes scaling. A great example in Netflix case was that the scale was so much that they really needed to invest in their own CDN called Open Connect. They had to build a device and they ship the device to all the ISPs so that they can cache a bunch of videos on the client side on that device so that they can deliver content super fast. And if you look at Dropbox case of building their own storage systems, while storage is their core capability, like it is like they are storage providers, so one could argue that it's their core capability, there's also complexity involved. Not everything was easily provided by AWS. Like they needed to get to the hardware level and tweak and optimize and tune. So complexity plays another huge role in really determining if we should be building or buying software. The next one is competence. Do we have the right engineers on the team who understand what needs to be built? Oftentimes, in my career, I've had teams that are very functionally organized, like front end, back end. I've had teams that are cross-functional, full stack engineers, combination of engineers who can work across the whole stack as well. But do we actually have that competence to be able to build this new feature or this new product line? And are they new engineers? Like, have they been in the company for some time? Do they have the domain knowledge? Do they have what it takes to actually understand what are we actually trying to solve for from a customer perspective, from a business perspective? And also when you think about competence, the other big aspect is also like do the engineers work well together? Is that a brand new team? Because your velocity sometimes is dependent on how closely have you worked in the past as well. And I think those are some of the key considerations as you think about competency. And is it a new technology? And we have, in the past couple of years, we have invested in some building out some key systems where we had to go explore some new technologies and learn something and implement that. And that takes time as well. So competence is one of the C's that I always look at. Like, do I have the team in place today? And if I don't have the team in place today, how long does it take to hire? In this current scenario, it takes at least 3 to 6 months to hire somebody, and you have to bake that into like building anything. If I buy, we in 2 companies ago, we actually acquired over 10 companies in the time I was there. And every acquisition immediately added value within the span of a couple months of acquiring that company. If we were to build something, it would take years, or at least several months, like 8 to 12 months to add those capabilities. So really that opportunity cost is a key in making those build and buy decisions. Next is the cohesion, connectedness, as I would like to call this. Basically how well whatever you're trying to do connects with the rest of the system. If it's buy, like, does it integrate with some of these other systems that you already have? A great example is we use Salesforce for CRM. And any software that we build, like we should, if it is something that ingests data, like I need to be able to know that if that supports Salesforce or like sending data to Salesforce, for example. So how well the system that you're trying to build or buy connects with the rest of the system is another huge factor, because you are trying to create value through an ecosystem and not just one single service or one single system. And that ecosystem has to it has to be value driven, and these systems have to coexist with each other and be dependent on each other as well. So cohesion is another huge factor. Competitive advantage. This again is one of the most critical decisions. We've actually I've been involved in several M&A discussions, like when we have tried to acquire companies, when we have tried to merge with other companies, and we always try to figure out like what is the competitive advantage of doing this ourselves versus like probably buying a company. And this is very closely connected to the capability piece. Is this core to our business, and do I need to be building that? Going back to that example of personal financial software, even if something was core, they felt like that wasn't the competitive advantage that they would get. Like it was actually building other customer experiences. There are several of those decisions where which I'm going to talk about shortly, that we have taken to figure out how can we be competitive, how can we be super competitive and ship a lot more features faster so that we can win the industry as well. And the last one is continuity, or you can also call it maintenance. You can tell, like I've been doing a lot of Google search on all the business words that starts with a C, and my vocabulary is full. But basically this is how do you think about maintaining these systems? Whether you build or buy, you are going to be adding new features to it. You're going to be adding a lot more capabilities to it. So how do you actually ensure that it can scale with the user growth, with new ideas that come, and you should be able to have like a strategy of continuing that aspect, that decision point that you made. Otherwise, you'll end up replacing that system every few years. And I've been in those situations where I've had to replace systems, and it was not great because it sets you back than doing things that you should ideally be doing. With that, I want to start off with a few examples. Why we built our own A/B testing solutions. So one of the previous companies that I worked at, we built our own A/B testing software. And it basically had everything from dividing users into groups, allocations, and also assigning experiments to various users. Actually, we also have our own A/B testing software at Apartment List today. And when I asked myself why we built our own, I think it came down to like 2 factors. One was capability and one was competitive advantage. In terms of the capability itself, Optimizely did not exist back then. There was no such readily available tool that gave us everything from allocation to assigning experiments to even reporting. We had one of the most robust reportings that I haven't seen till date from out-of-the-box software. So that is why we decided to actually build it. The second one was the speed of experiments. We were a subscription-based business. We had to ship a ton of experiments and try different subscription-based models. We had to try different paywalls that shows up changes in prices, changes in features, and trying to charge every little thing. And that would not have been possible without fast iteration. So that definitely was one of the capabilities I was missing that we felt like we needed to build it in-house. And then customization. Our product was like highly customized for targeting to various customers and segments and even subgroups of customers. And if they take certain actions one after the other, they would get a different experience versus something else. So in those situations, it's actually better off building your own. If you actually take Dropbox, for example, or even like Apple Maps, I think one of the reasons that Apple moved away from Google Maps was to provide the turn navigation. And it is so useful. Like I'm not sure if I'll get to the right destination, but every time my watch beeps when I need to take a turn, it's super useful customer experience because I actually find that super valuable. It's very on point to that customer experience. So if you want to achieve customization, in which case we did, we ended up building our own software. It also provided us a huge competitive advantage. The insights, as I mentioned, the reporting was great. Like we were able to build out all the reporting that we needed. And we never had to, we also made it extremely customizable in the sense that, configurable, in the sense that any new future engineers would work on that. If any new insights that they need to be able to add, it's easily add. Like you can easily add it without having to go into the code and enhance. So that made it pretty easy. And then quicker feature launches. Anything from, today, even at Apartment List, we have our own A/B testing software, and I don't think it's right. I think we have reached the scale where we probably will be going the buy route. But it takes us time to do feature launches because the experimentation setup takes time. And especially figuring out how do you set various experiments and in what use cases. And if your experiments fail, also going back and cleaning up all that code is another nightmare. So in this situation, we were doing very quick feature launches and we needed something that was extremely custom. And a result of all of this was we were actually able to get more customers. We were able to launch across multiple countries, which is what we needed for that stage of the company. And so it made sense to build our own. But today, if you ask myself, would I build an A/B testing software? The answer would probably be no, because there are so many out there that I can actually use and probably customize to my needs. The second one of my favorites, is why we built our own billing system. And this actually, 3 companies I've been in, we've all had our own billing systems. I think this has been one of the most common thing that people end up building instead of buying. In the world of Stripe, it amazes me that we were still building a billing system. But there are actually valid reasons for it. One was the complexity. In our case, actually, the industry that we were in had heavy chargeback rates. There are certain industries that are considered extremely high risk industries, and some of those are travel and dating and furniture industry or e-commerce in general. So if you use services such as Stripe, they will not be allowing you to take so much chargebacks, and it's also sometimes cuts through to your margins of the business itself. So that was one of the biggest factors. While we wanted to use an external readily available software, we were actually not able to use because of the industry. And second one, in terms of the complexity, we were a subscription-based business, and on a monthly basis, we had millions of customers, and all of those subscription charges need to happen around the same time. And so we needed to maintain fallback use cases. So we actually connected with 2 or 3 payment processors. And if we would send the payment to one processor, and if we got an error code, we would actually send it to a different payment processor. Payment processor or processors also have availability issues. A lot of times, they might have their own maintenance and they might not be readily available. So in those cases, we always made sure that we have something to fall back to, and that was a very important use case that some of the readily available tools did not have back then. And multi-country presence, we were supporting different currencies, and we needed to do all kinds of complex calculations to support that. And renewal rates, we always wanted to maintain high renewal rates. So because we did not want people to at the end of the subscription, leave the platform. We wanted them to stay. So we were offering all kinds of discounts and interesting use cases to continue to maintain those renewal rates. So we needed to have our own platform. And in terms of cost, I think the biggest was actually our margin was super low. And that was super important for us. If we ended up actually using Stripes of the world, we would be cutting into those margins, in which case then we actually needed more scale or additional monetization strategies to be able to actually make it work in terms of the business model itself. So it did not make sense for us to actually go the route of buying something off the shelf. So that's why we built our own billing system. Coming back to why we bought email software, at Apartment List, I think one of the biggest problems that we had our own in-house email software. We called it Neeson. I think there's a story. Vatasha here knows the story. Basically, Neeson was it was named after Liam Neeson. Liam, if you reverse it, is male, and Neeson, most of the email issues are delivery issues, so it's no scene. So that was a creative thing, but we built our own. It was super relevant for the stage of the business when we actually built it, because we were a startup. We did not have the scale. We had more complex features than we actually needed, but it made sense to build it back in the day. But what really came to light was, one, we did not support that system at all after it was built. It was built 7 years ago. We did not have the bandwidth because the team had moved on to supporting other initiatives that were super critical for the company. So we did not have the bandwidth. We also lost the competency piece. The people who actually built it were no longer with the company. So then not enough documentation. There was a knowledge gap, and we really needed to fill that gap. And it was a complex enough code base that no one wanted to go and learn from it. It was not pretty. And no one wanted to work on technologies like handlebars. So they wanted to actually find a solution. And things also change on a short notice a lot of times. We wanted to make a lot of changes. We wanted to change the template. We did a rebranding exercise, and where we changed our colors and logos and things like that. When that happened, you had to go and update all the emails. And it was weeks and months of engineering effort, which could have totally been a marketing effort to just go update templates, which was not warranted. So that's why we decided to go buy an email software. And we didn't buy just one, we bought 2. We got Courier to support our transactional emails, and then because not one solution fits all use cases, and I think it's okay to buy the right software for the right need. And then we worked with another provider for our marketing emails. And that has been working out pretty well. The cohesion was another thing that we achieved. We needed different use cases and different vendors supporting different use cases. And we needed them to integrate with each other. So that was very critical. And then basically, we got a huge upgrade from what we were doing. And we had to build very less to send data and stuff to both of these systems, and both are in the works right now. So that's our buy story. Why we bought testing software. Every company I've worked at has had some form of QA. QA engineers. And I think those of you who have worked in that setup also know that you can make it work with just one QA engineer, not even make it work with 5 or 10. I've actually had, been at a company where we had like 30 QA engineers, automation engineers, could never catch up on automation. Like it was for a team of much larger, like 100 engineer team, and 30% was QA, but still we could not catch up on automation. There's always a problem in staying up to date. And because of that, I think it's super critical to really figure out what are we trying to solve for and what do we need. Yes, we want high quality systems, but also we don't want it at the cost of never being able to achieve that. It always remains a dream. So we decided to actually work with a third party. There are many out there. We use a company called Mabel, and it works pretty well for us. So engineers actually create these tests, and not just engineers, we have designers and product managers and analysts. All of them actually create tests, and they all get together and continue to build more and more automation. And that actually helped us a lot. It gave us better control. It helps us stay on top of things. Also, it's built on Selenium, so it's easily portable. That was another decision factor. And more importantly, huge value in a short amount of time. And cost, I don't have to worry about investing in a big team to do just that. And now my engineers can actually focus on building features and care about quality, similar to a DevOps culture, how they think about operational excellence. Quality is one aspect. So that's how we ended up buying a QA software for our needs. Why we bought and built analytics, and this is, I've not talked about continuity so far. I think one of the biggest, we actually have Google Analytics 360. We actually built a pipeline on Snowplow, and then we also have BigQuery and Looker. And the reason we had to both buy and build was constantly evolving business needs. Like data is one of the key pieces of any company. It's your backbone. So you need to have high data accuracy and high data governance. Like you need to make sure that every decision that gets made about your product and at your company is actually built on a very strong foundation. And we felt like whatever we were looking for was not readily available. So we decided to actually both buy and then build to fill the gaps that was not there. And we also wanted to build on the continuity. Like let's say you probably walk into a situation where people already have an existing software that does something. You may not always be able to replace it. It might be solving a need that is super relevant, or you might be logged into a very long contract that you can get out of at the moment without it being super expensive. So in which cases can you actually build additional capabilities? I think Netflix is a great example. They did the opposite of what Dropbox did. They moved from data center to cloud, but they ended up building things like CDN. They ended up building Chaos Monkeys and things like that to actually continue to fill the gap and build high reliability as well. And always, there's no one solution that fits all scenarios. So it's important to actually diversify and figure out, can I build, can I buy, can I actually do both, and what use cases? And there are some contradictions to these as well. I have actually built as a necessity to attract talent at times or foster innovations. One of the actually last year, we have something called A-Time, like Google's 20% time, where engineers get to work on something they're very passionate about that we introduced to the company about 2 years ago. And one of the things that they wanted to work on was really exploring high performance on the website. So they started exploring Next.js, and they did a proof of concept. It became so useful that we actually funded it. It became our SEO strategy because we realized if we give customers a very high performing website, Google also likes that in terms of the ranking. So we actually invested. We spent time redoing our web stack. We still have React. We use TypeScript and Next.js. Really increased performance tenfold. Also brought in a lot of revenue to the company, and that was the most meaningful build. And it made sense. It kept existing talent. It encouraged innovation. And if you look at some of the work that Facebook has done, or even Twitter and stuff, there are a lot of times, there's a lot of open source contribution, and companies take that route to be able to attract new talent and continue to build on that. Sometimes you also build as a necessity for creating new lines of business. We have a portfolio of allocations. We spend about 80% of time on the core investments and about 20 on anything net new, and like figuring out new lines of businesses or investing in some, and exploring new way of doing thing or new monetization model. So in those cases, it's pretty much proof of concept driven approach. You want to just build something scrappy, you want to try different technologies, like you just want to get to market faster. In those situations, it's actually okay to build, because you probably will not have the budget, and then you also don't have the time. So the best course of action is to actually build, and then buy as a way to get to the market faster. In our case, in the email scenario, like we really needed to, email is such a growth lever. Like we send a lot of emails, we engage with our customers through emails. It's such an important aspect of our strategy that we did not want to waste more time not investing in that. So we decided to go the buy route. So to summarize all of that, build, buy, and build on what you buy. I think now in the current scenario, I think in almost 80% of the use cases, you end up building on what you buy. Very few use cases you probably end up building, especially if it is either trying to attract talent, trying to do hack weeks and foster some innovation, or maybe it's simple enough that it's not worth going the route of buying software. You end up buying in almost all other cases, and in most cases, you end up building on what you buy. Everything that I've bought, like we've bought 2 email providers, we had to build some stuff that connects both of them and make it work for us. Even in the A/B testing or in billing system, in everything, like even if in the future, like we had replaced certain parts of the system, we ended up building on what we bought. So that's all I had for today. Any questions?